as per usual. Let us know where you're tuning in from and what's going on. And yeah, this is us here for the last time for the year. Year's gone by fast.
So fast, so fast, insane. And what a year it's been, right? Like, the start was a bit of a bubble, and now we're, things are looking less rosy, and so it's had it all this year, I think. But
Yeah,
a
it's
lot of
honestly a roller
learnings, a lot of
coaster.
takeaways.
Yeah, for sure.
What?
What was the biggest learning for you, David?
Oh, great question. Great question. My biggest learning. Oh, this is real tough. Um, I've learned a lot about my focus this year has been on operational efficiency.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Maybe this is too detailed, but for me, I've always been good at keeping, from a management perspective, keeping teams motivated and have a strong focus on coaching. Hopefully, as
Mm-hmm.
everybody here knows, but I really, maybe my area that I most need to work on is around like the operational stuff and system, like strategy and execution. So that's been the main thing that I've been working on this year. What about you, Morgan?
Yeah, I would say, think for me, it's taking what my gut or instinct is saying and making that into a logical next step, an action step. So it might be like, hey, this is what, intuition might be like, hey, this is something I need to do. And typically I might ignore it or try to back it up with something different. But now I'm like, okay, like that makes sense, I think. So let's figure out how that works. And since I've been doing it, I've had bigger strides and bigger momentum than when I don't listen to it. So that's been really interesting as of late.
Nice, nice.
Yeah.
It's been very big year. Sorry, I need to apologize to the audience. I've not turned into a lumberjack. I promise. It's where I am. If you, I don't know, we've got someone here from Sandy's from New Orleans. I don't know what the weather's like in New Orleans, but right now where I am. It's -5, or that's about 20 degrees Fahrenheit. Morgan just told me in Fahrenheit. Yeah,
We
in
got the
Fahrenheit. So
translation.
yeah, so it's freezing. So I'm wearing this like woolen lumberjacky type thing. So apologies in advance for that. 80 here.
Oh, 80 Fahrenheit. Oh yeah, they're feeling good. Mine in Atlanta, it's just disgusting. I don't even know what it is. It's just been raining every day, single day, so I'm not really not really fired up about that. All right, so everybody that's here, this whole entire time is for you all. So if you have something right now that you want to ask a question on, feel free to throw it in the chat. Feel free to throw it in the Q&A. This is your time just to get questions answered. We know this is the end of the year and people want to get on the phones or go selling, and as we have only a couple real business days left, but this is your opportunity right now to throw in a question, throw something in the Q&A. We are here to answer those questions as we wrap up this year. But I know, David, if you maybe want to talk to something that your team's been asking questions on, or what you've been telling your team right now. Obviously, we have a good amount of people in here who are SDR, sales reps, as we see anyone who's going to come through and ask some questions.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I suppose on behalf of my team, I'd love to pick your brain on some stuff, Morgan. I think the
Yeah.
first question. Okay, so first challenge, perhaps like the team are facing SDR wise, right? I manage the SDRs at Cognism. SDR wise, I think some of them are struggling with perhaps December being a tough month to be an SDR. I think, right? Generally,
Yep.
it's our worst month of the year. It's a shorter month because of holiday days and everything else. And I think some people are kind of, it's been a long year. They're tired. They're worn out. Like, how would you advise them to just still keep those energy levels up and not just write off December? Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's tough. Like, first and foremost, I think we have to acknowledge that it is tough and that mentally it's going to be really hard to put yourself out there when, especially right now, where you only have, I'm kind of looking at the calendar, like probably 5 to 6 business days until that weekend of Christmas. And a lot of people probably already checking out, which I've actually seen across the board already. And so one of the things that I always recommend or tell people to focus on is understanding how to finish the race strong. And I know that sounds cliche, and I know like across the board, that's, you might be like, okay, like I've heard that before, but it's really just focusing on like, how do you finish this race strong? And right, there's and part of this, and knowing that if you finish the race strong, that you're gonna feel way better taking that rest or break going into the new year because you want that momentum. And the thing is that life is all about momentum. When you have momentum, you want to continuously ride it, you want to continuously move forward. If you're just like, hey, I'm just gonna mail it in for December, that my mindset might carry over to January, then February, and then now you're in trouble. So I just tell people like, hey, look, like just focus in. And I always tell people, hey, like focus on the first, December 1st to the 15th. I know we're already in the 14th, but December 1st to 15th, what can I do to be the most impactful? And then if you need to get some extra work in there as well after, great. But December is just a harder month as a whole because people are checked out, holidays, etc. But you could still make it happen if you tell yourself, I'm going to finish this race strong. And typically, that's where people end up really getting that next gear because they're taking it seriously to go to the next step. But that's like the way that I think about it.
Interesting. And just then you mentioned the point of momentum. I totally agree. I think certainly SDRing, but I think sales in general is all about momentum. Perhaps there are people in the audience that are thinking about their 2023. There's I don't know whether you are, Morgan, but I'm a bit of a new year, new me type person. I like to use it as a bit of a reset. Is there any ways that you could advise, or any advice you could give on like how to sustain momentum over a longer period of time? Is there anything you've done in your career that's really helped you achieve that?
Yeah, so I just think about things as maybe some of you don't watch this in here, but NASCAR. I don't watch NASCAR either, but the concept of NASCAR is they have to go around the lap. They have to go around the race like 300 times, 200 times, 100 times. So you can't like the car can't go around 100 times without taking a break, right? And that's at the elite level. They have to take a break. So I think about things in sprints. So like right now in December, like this is more so I have a sprint for like 16 days at the beginning of the front end of the month, and the back end I do what I need to do on a different scale, not going as hard but going hard in other areas. But for the beginning of the year, I think everyone feels this way. They want to go really hard, and I think it's like 70% of people fail their New Year's resolution within like 14 days. So the thing is that like when you start a new year, it's not just like, hey, I'm gonna do this for like 2 seconds. It's like, how can I like really like get the most out of it? So when I do things, I do it in 3-4 month sprints. So for 3 to 4 months, like I go really hard at something. I take like I'm not taking a whole month break, but for that month, I maybe not be going as hard, and then I kind of re-up that again, and then I go hard again. So that's the way that I remain focused, is that you have to be like full throttle and then take a step back, full throttle, take a step back. If you're always going full throttle, like at some point, like you will face some type of burnout. You will face something across the board. I've felt that, and I realized I had to make sure that I could continuously have the momentum by taking those interval breaks.
Amazing. Love it. We've got some questions coming in. Really great questions as well. Should we take an audience question?
Yeah, let's take the audience question. I think we'll have on the back end marketing can pull these questions up one by one as we go into them. So hi, any advice on how to deliver a really good cold call introduction value proposition when cold calling to a prospect? David, we've talked about this a lot. I'll go first. I think that I could give you introductions and I can give you value propositions to use. I find that advice is helpful, but it's not impactful. It's helpful because it'll help you in the moment, but it's not impactful because it won't help you for your career. So when I think about a really good cold call introduction, the first thing you need to think about is how to hook someone in. So I use an analogy of fishing. I'm not the best fisherman ever. Like I've gone fishing a couple times and it's been like, okay. But when you think about fishing and you think about cold calling, it's one and the same. When you're doing an introduction, it's like you throwing out the bait out there so that people could feel like they're getting hooked in, essentially. So when you're thinking about a really good cold call introduction, I want you to think about how can I interrupt this pattern, and for them, they experiencing something that they haven't heard before. And again, if I give you something, then that might be something everyone else has heard. So you have to be a little bit different, but you have to think about how can you hook people in and get them to have attention, because you only have like 3 to 5 seconds to do that. Then on the value proposition, you have to reverse engineer what people care about. So whoever you're calling, I would write out what are the 3 to 5 things that this person cares about, what are their goals, what are their obstacles. If you're able to determine that, then you can create good value propositions. So I'm giving you the framework of how to go about and do this. I could just give you, hey, here's an example, but it's better to understand how to do it so that it's repeatable to whatever position you go to.
100%. Yeah, I would always agree with Morgan. Thank you so much, Kate, for your questions, by the way, and just tuning in general. For me, so we want to be value led. So we want to focus on, the first thing that comes out your mouth basically needs to talk about a value that the product brings, not just like a spiel on the product, but it does need to give a bit of context as well. Where you can. For me, and Morgan just gave you some framework that's really great. Start with the challenges. What we tend to do is we tend to present a couple of different options of the main challenges that our product fixes, and then so presenting those two challenges and then asking them which one resonates with you more. And usually someone will, that kind of natural human reaction will be to say one of them as opposed to be like, oh, just like neither of them, right? They are generally pretty likely to pick one or the other, and then that leads you nicely into exactly how your product or service can fix. So for us, it could be something like, typically we're hearing from salespeople that they're not having they know who their target market is, but they're not having enough conversations with them, or they're having conversations, but they're with the wrong people. Which one resonates with you more, right? And that's both of them our product fixes. So hopefully that helps, Kate, as some just guiding principles to take. Keep it short as well. Don't make it too long. Keep it super short. Keep it to 2 lines, 3 lines max, where you can.
Awesome. Let's keep the questions rolling. How do you suggest staying motivated when you are failing as an SDR? Ooh, okay. And then also as well, I see people putting their questions in. We're going to get to as many questions as we can. So just, we're going to go through each one. And if you want to chime into the questions that we have up on the screen, feel free to go in the chat to make this interactive. And then also Kate as well. Thanks for your question. Hopefully that was helpful for you right there. So this is a mental thing. So my belief as an SDR, if you all can either co-sign this or disagree, but this is just what I've seen to be true, and in my experience, is that this is a very mental game as an SDR. The skills can be taught, but really the successful SDRs I've met, it's just like an 80 to like 90% mental game at the end of the day, because you're going through so many rejections, you're going through so many obstacles. Like, it's just so you really want to be able, across the board to maximize your mindset and be as positive as you can be. So how you stay motivated when you're failing as an SDR is that you have to keep a steady mindset and know that the role comes with highs and lows. So there will be times when you will be really successful, and there will be times where you are not as successful. And I always stay motivated by knowing that when I'm not doing well, I'm finding what doesn't work, and I'm also identifying how I can move forward with confidence, and then identifying the things that I'm actually losing at or not doing well, to then learn opportunities to do well moving forward. So the best way that you can stay motivated is to find what goals align with your future state and looking at those goals to stay motivated. When you are failing or losing at something, it sucks in the moment, and we've all been there. But how you're going to move forward is the goals and the benchmarks that you set for yourself moving forward to be successful, because you're going to fail regardless. You can't avoid failure if you're seeking success. So if that's the case, you have to use the failures as a building block and use them as lessons. But you can only really take that as a lesson if you're going towards a goal. And so that's how I've stayed motivated. Like my first 3 months, I failed as an SDR. I didn't hit quota. I was heavily discouraged, but I had goals that I could strive towards. So that helped me to stay motivated towards those, even though when it was hard. And it's going to be hard. And that's something you can't avoid.
Yeah, 100%. I think, Peter, I've just had a little nosy at your LinkedIn. I'm assuming it's this Peter. And I can see that you're not like, you're not like a brand new SDR. You're not like a first month, second month. You've been in the role for a little bit longer. I would tend to agree with Morgan, that first things first, failing you failing is really kind of a mindset thing. Ultimately, if you're going in and you're picking up the phone every day, or picking up the phone or sending an email out or anything else, you're not failing, right? Because you're doing something. So failing is really just like an opinion at this stage. But one thing I always focus on with any of my team that go through a patch where they're struggling or maybe they're struggling in general is we put all of our attention on the inputs, and and again, as Morgan said, we create goals around the inputs, and then our rule is if we meet our goals in terms of the inputs, then we're succeeding and we're celebrating that success. So often a really, really quick fix for me with people that are kind of like in a bad headspace, think they're struggling, is at Cognism, one of the key focuses is on calling. So we'll say, okay, let's make a rule. You're going to make 80 calls every day for the next week. And if we make 80 calls and then we don't book a meeting, we're still patting ourselves on the back and saying that today was a successful day. And it's crazy how quickly this turns around so many people, because they start making the 80 calls. They're focused totally on just like the inputs. They're celebrating in themselves that they're hitting those input metrics, and then everything becomes more positive. And by being, and as soon as they become more positive, it reflects on their phone manner, and everything else, and they end up booking more meetings anyway. So I think first step for you, Peter, and my suggestion is let's, exactly what Morgan says. Let's focus on some input metrics. Let's set some targets that are just not kind of how many meetings or how many opportunities or whatever your company is targeting on. But let's focus on the input stuff, and then let's just make sure we're hitting those. If we're still struggling after that, then like we can go from there. But let's just start hitting our inputs first and foremost.
Awesome. Appreciate the feedback, Peter. Let's go into the next question here so we can dive into it. And yeah, if you're putting in the inputs, like also iteration as well, like figuring out like what is actually working, doubling down. There's a lot of ways of going about it, but let's go into this question here: how to follow up, check in with prospects in the new year without bombarding them right as everyone is getting back from time off. So I think the biggest thing here is that you won't be seen as a nuisance if you come with something that is contextualized. And so what I mean by that is, Libby, what happens is most people in their follow-ups, and just none of y'all be this person, because like if you do this, you're not going to get a good response as you want. So most people follow up and say, hey, we talked in December, you said reach back out in January, can we have a conversation? That is like 80% of people's follow-up, which is generic. It doesn't really do anything, and it's what everyone else does. So your goal here is you want to re-prospect and figure out, what is actually happening in the new year. Go to the website, go to the LinkedIn profile, find a nugget that you can use or a clue, and then use that to say, hey, as I look deeper into your organization this year, and then you go into it. So how I would start your emails is, as I was looking deeper into your organization as we start the new year, you could start that off as a good prompt, and then you speak to whatever you found. That should allow you to get more meetings. But most people are just going to follow up and touch base and check in and just say, like, we talked in December, you said talk in January. It's not contextualized. It doesn't really bring value. And your goal is to bring value. So you want to change that up.
Yeah, totally agree. I also think you can just, if you're worried about that at all with any particular prospect, I think it's probably more of a you worry than a them worry. However, if you are worried at all, just put at the start of the email, hey, I'm sure you're super busy. I know you've just got back, but I want to make sure this is, I was really keen to pick up this conversation. Is the week after next a good time, or is the week after, right? If you are worried that a particular prospect might be super busy, but at the same time, if you're coming at them with value, then I don't think there's ever a bad time. And certainly what I see often is that January is the best month for my team in terms of being an SDR, mostly because because so many people are pushing back in December and saying, okay, go, can you contact me in January? So, yeah, from my perspective, I cannot wait for January, and I cannot wait to follow up on everybody. And I think, from my experience, it's super rare that people are like, oh, I'm too busy right now in Jan, because they're so refreshed after the holidays. But if you're worried, write it, add that to your email, and I think then they can't object to it.
Awesome. All right, let's get the next question up, and we got some really good questions. So we're going through: is sales an art or a science? David, what's your take on this one?
I'm a science guy, Morgan. As I don't know whether you can tell this by now. I am not. I really feel like I've got no artistic bones in my body. I studied. I was always like a maths guy. I did further maths at school, and I did economics at university because I wanted to write into Excel spreadsheets all the time. Yep. I think it's both. This is gonna be super. Morgan, I reckon you're gonna say the same thing. I think I don't think it can ever be seen as polarizing like that. I think there's a massive science element in it. If you can ask anybody in revenue operations type roles that if you make enough. Again, thinking about like top of funnel 360 stuff, if you make enough calls to enough potential prospects, you're gonna have a certain amount of conversations. That means you're guaranteed to have enough, which means you're gonna get enough meetings, and then from those meetings, there's always a pretty standard close rate. But also the artistic part of it is probably in your messaging and how I think it's art in how you react to what people are saying, right? And how the conversational side of sales, which is sometimes harder to teach. So I really think it's both. I know that's such a boring answer, but it's different elements will need different things. What about you, Morgan?
Yeah, I'm gonna say both. They're the only thing that I would take in consideration is that as you go further down the sales cycle, like it can be more of an art as you close and negotiate. I think there is an argument to that, but I don't think you can detach one from the other. It's both an art and a science.
100%. What does everybody else think? Can we post in the chat what people think? I'm assuming I actually am curious. Just going to say both.
Yeah. Someone might surprise us to be like, you know what? Y'all are all wrong.
I'm so firm. It's science. It's absolute science. I'll die on this. I'll die on this hill.
No anything.
Thanks, Sandy.
All right, cool. Everybody else curious on what your perspective is? If it's both, go ahead and put it in there, or you think it's art or it's science. I actually am curious on that as well. But as we see what everyone goes into it, let's see what the next question is. Peter, I can see that. Like, I believe that to a certain degree. Like, science to get the meeting, as you get closer, art is the close. But then one can argue you can't just wing the sales cycle. You got to have some science, and you can't just wing your cold calls. You got to have some type of science to that. Or you have to add some type of art to your cold calls, like a little bit of flavor to it. But that's my whole thing. But let's go to this. One of the things we often read is prepare your call and do research about customer business. How do you proceed to do those research when your expertise field is really a niche field? And that would be stupid from in customer display, certain internet information. I'm working in cybersecurity. It's a very interesting question. I could take a stab at it first if you.
I'm just reading it. To display it on internet, certain info. So sorry, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know how you're reading, Morgan, but it's like, okay, so this person's asking, do your research and understand the customer business, but actually when you do it, it's such a niche area that we as sellers don't actually know what their business is, and we don't want to seem stupid. That's like, how I'm reading it. I'm reading it. Okay. Jam could let us know otherwise if we're reading it wrong, but like, I'm assuming this is a discovery call. If you end up doing the research, like, you're not as maybe thorough in that research, and then the person's gonna be like, what are you talking about? That's how I'm reading this. Jam could say if we're reading it wrong otherwise, but
I mean, if we were to go into this and look at it, like I think ultimately at the end of the day, like I always just recommend people to come with some type of, hey, I did research on your website, or I did research about your organization. Here are things I believe to be true. I think it just shows that you're knowledgeable as a seller. It shows that you know about the industry and you're willing to have a conversation. That's like how I'm taking this, but without context of further of what I'm actually reading here, I don't know how to move forward with the answer. So that's like more so where I'm at, is that like I like to present, this is what I found, this is what's going on, so that people feel comfortable in what I'm telling them.
Yeah, okay. My favorite part about being a salesperson is hearing about everybody's business, everybody's journey. I used to be a B2C door-to-door seller, so I met a bunch of different people and learned so much about, like, you know, the way people live and things like that. So, and that was I'm generally very curious individual, and so it's really interesting for me to hear those things. So to be honest with you, JM, I think I'm an expert in one field, and that's, or I'm an expert. I like to think that I'm an expert in contact data, which is where Cognism sits right now. And whenever I was calling anybody, whenever I speak to anybody about Cognism, as soon as they start talking contact data and CRM and sales acceleration in general, like, I'm an expert in that. However, we speak to customers, you know, all different types of customers. And for example, they might, we target cybersecurity firms if they need contact data. And I'm in exactly the same boat. I don't know cybersecurity at all. And so for me, I always approach these calls with complete honesty. And I would say, look, I've done my research, and, you know, I can see obviously you work in cybersecurity. I've seen that you're targeting X, Y, and Z, but can you just tell me a little bit more? Because honestly, I'm so new to this, and I just, you know, like, I've never heard. And actually, I think a lot of the times the prospects really appreciated that, and they understood that. I very rarely got pushback of like, oh, you should know our area. And if they did, then they're probably the sort of people that I don't want to work with anyway. Right. So,
Probably.
yeah. So, like, you know, it's a great disqualification criteria if they were going to be so close-minded. So from my perspective, I mean, if it's related to your product, learn it, study it, find out from experts in your field, find out from people in the company, and really know your field that you're the area, the exact area that you're selling into or you're selling. However, that doesn't mean you need to be an expert in what every single one of your customers does. I don't know anything about
Okay,
cybersecurity, but I can sell cybersecurity.
he added in some context. So, okay, it's difficult to get information. Okay, so that makes sense. Okay, so ultimately, like, you just need to, you are having conversations with people already, and they're probably giving, I don't know about cybersecurity, right? I don't sell it every single day, but what I do know is that it could be common practice. And what I mean by common practice is that there's probably like 2 to 3 things that people typically mention, and that's a good way to go about it as well. Say, hey, like, you know, I've been talking to a lot of people in the cybersecurity field here, like 3 things I keep hearing, like, is that on your radar or not? Yes or no, right? And you could kind of go from there to gauge like if that's the case. But this just sounds like, if you don't have any information at all and it's really sensitive and there's nothing on the website at all, then you just have to run your discovery to uncover what that is, and you're gonna have to treat each situation differently, right? I think you have to take that information of study your customers and buyers and websites by the information that you get ultimately, and that's the key.
Yeah, I with this, we have it sometimes as well, and I think one thing that we've always tried to do is explain why we're asking that question. Like, if I'm asking them, for example, like what CRM tool that they use, then and they say, no, actually, I don't want to tell you, then I'll follow that up with like, look, the reason I'm asking is not because it really matters. We just have a bunch of integrations, and I want to let you know whether like we would integrate with your CRM. And that sometimes works, but you also are going to get people shut off. And so sometimes you just need to kind of, then you'll probably have to go for a more generic pitch. But try and explain why you're asking the question. That usually makes a big difference outside.
Cool. Awesome, Jam. Hopefully that was helpful. I know that we kind of went on a different routes on that one, but hopefully that was helpful. Let's get the next question in here. And as we look at this, any advice on how to do cold calling as a furthest approach, step to a prospect and multi-threading, multi-channel? Okay, there's like a couple questions here. So,
yeah.
the thing that I would tell you, because I'll just talk about the multi-channel. This is just what I believe to be true. I believe that, so according to the data, 80% of the responses you get in a campaign come in the first 5 touches. So you want to make sure that these first 5 touches are impactful and they make sense and they weave together. And then from there, you can do whatever touches you want. So my whole thing is that the first 3 touches that I found to be the most impactful are, number 1, a LinkedIn connection request. Now, at the end of the day, some people in here might not have their buyers on LinkedIn, which, okay, that is what it is. But for the majority of you in here, your buyers are on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn connection requests puts a face to the name, makes it easier. Then the next step is an email. And then, oh no, the next step is a call. And then I do an email the same day. So when I think about my first call, I want that to be a voicemail to tell them to go respond to the email I'm going to send them to get a response. So that's like my advice on multi-channel, multi-threading. You can add in different emails and calls from there like you see fit. But I really want to speak to the first 3 steps because that's going to be the most impactful. And those are things you can do there.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm trying to maybe I'm going too deep on this, Kate, but I'm thinking that maybe you're asking this question because you're worried about doing a cold call as the first step of your cadence, and just to reinforce, I suppose, just to reinforce why it's a good idea. For me, speaking to someone over the phone versus an email or even a LinkedIn message, or gift or whatever, is if the first thing that I say to someone over email or over LinkedIn or something that isn't the phone, I suppose, is a no, I find it's very, very difficult to turn that around, because a lot of objection handling or good objection happens when it becomes a conversation. Whereas if I'm calling someone and the first thing they say is no, then often, it's still a conversation, and I can open them up very easily. It's very difficult. If you imagine, right, an email, someone says no, okay, what's the reason, right? Like that, I reply saying, okay, do you mind me asking, is there like any particular reason? They reply with the reason, but that could be, a day later, 2 days later. It's really difficult to get momentum. So if I'm going to have a conversation with someone, then the best place is the call. And so why is calling a good idea for the first step? It's because it's the best place for me to have that first conversation with people. And so that's why, every cadence that I have, I'm pretty sure that every cadence that I have ever built always has a call step, first step. I think sometimes we have a LinkedIn connection because it's good maybe just for them to see our face and then we speak to them straight after. But
Yeah.
a connection isn't me writing them a message. So that's it is a bit colder, but that's why I see it such an effective step.
Love that. All right. So, Kate, hopefully that was helpful as well on that question. Let's get to the next one here. And feel free to chime in, everybody, when these questions come up if you have a perspective as well. So, Stephen, we're a company based in Ireland. Shout out to Ireland. Looking into outbound strategy for 2023. Our customers are global and have senior roles. Could you define what senior roles mean, Stephen? I'm assuming like executives, but I just want to understand what that means. A majority in the U.S. Should we consider including cold calling? One worry is people not picking up the phone to the random Irish number. Well, first and foremost, if you're calling the United States, Europe, y'all should know this. If you're calling the United States with any accent, you're gonna beat out us. So, like, that's first and foremost. So you should actually be calling. Your accent's gonna probably get you a higher conversion rate. Like, I can't train on that, but like it just will. So like, let's just like be frank on that one. But number 2 is like, I would not do something just because someone might not pick up. Like, you don't know what you don't know. So I would call those people, right? Do what you need to do, right? You can go get Cognism if you need to as well, and go make those direct dials. Like, I don't really see the non-factor not doing this. Like, if you're just doing emails, you're limiting yourself. If you're just doing emails and social, you're limiting yourself. You need to be using every single thing because you genuinely don't know. That's when it comes down to time blocking, doing what you need to do. So, I mean, I would be cold calling here. I don't see why you wouldn't, but I don't know if David has something else.
So actually, we have got data that says that if you call from a UK or Irish number to the US, the connect rate is slightly lower than a US number. So your
Okay.
worry is, this is me validating your worry, but it's not super significant. It's like a minor, people are still picking up is what I'm saying. So to back up Morgan now, you should definitely just call. 100%. However, there are solutions, and Lizzie actually posted this in the chat just now. It's incredibly easy to acquire US numbers and then make it so that the US number is the one that appears on your phone, or appears to the person in the US. So there are, we do it through, we're outreach customers at Cognism, and so outreach has that functionality for us. I'm sure like SalesOff will do the same thing, but any kind of dialing company should have that capability. And one thing, and this is kind of cool, Morgan, I don't know whether you're aware of this, but we're trialing out another thing with our phoning to increase connect rates. Do you know Tito Bort? Shouts out
Yes,
Tito Bort.
I hung out him like 2 weeks ago. Yeah, he's good people.
Yeah, he's a good dude. He's a really good dude. So Tito Bort has introduced me to a service where when you're calling, and it only works in the US, but and this is for anybody, maybe check it out. Tito's going to love me. Go straight to Tito about this, right? But I can't believe I'm doing this for free as well. I'm just doing it. So when you're calling the US, what you can do is you have to pay for it, but you can make it appear on someone's phone with your name and the company you're calling from automatically. So it kind of looks, on first impressions, it kind of looks, instead of like it's from no one, it looks like it's from someone in your address book. And it's genius. And we're trialing at the moment, but it looks pretty good. Like, it looks like it's increasing the connect rate as well. So there's lots of ways that you can manipulate. It's super fire. Loads of ways you can manipulate your connect rate up here, Stephen, if you're worried about it from that perspective. And then again, I'd agree with Morgan. I always hire the best person for people for the job, but I'll tell you what, the Irish group in my London office are just killing it, and I think they're super talented people. But I know that their accents are also having a small factor in that as well. So yeah, wouldn't be afraid at all. 100%. Here you go. US number, an Irish accent, higher conversion. We got it. Awesome.
That's it. That's the formula. All right, Monica wants to know what that company is again, David. If you want to just put it in the chat.
Yeah, I can't. Yeah, I'll put it in the chat now. Let me find it. Tito's I'm actually gonna get you. I'm gonna get you his LinkedIn, and I need you to message him and say David Bentham from Cognism pushed you over, because then I'm hoping that he'll pay me some commission for it or something. Right now I'm doing this for free, but like I'm hoping that if you all love it,
he's good people.
He's
good people.
He's a good dude. He's the number one fan of SDRs in the world, so I really appreciate him, and he's a great person to follow. To be honest, for everybody here, he posts loads of SDR content. So if that's, or sales content in general, so if that's what you're interested in, but his company, which is it says here Ulti Sales, that's one of the services they provide. Look at that. Awesome. Free advertisement.
He's gonna love that. All right, let's see. Do we have any more questions that we did not get to? I think on the back end here. What opener usually works? So, Victor, I'm going to disappoint you and tell you that, I mean, I can give you an answer, but like there is no silver bullets here. And also, like, this is where I think sometimes you can go on LinkedIn or even listen to advice that I'm going to give you, David gives you. And it's useful to take people's advice and try it. But if you take someone's advice and like it doesn't work for you, that doesn't mean that like it just doesn't overall work. Like, everyone has different intros, and the reason that people share advice is because it worked for them. I think the biggest mistake that people make is that they hear something, it doesn't work for them, and they're like, oh, none of these things work. It's like, well, like, it may not just work for you. So there's different openers that I believe to work and don't work. I'm not going to go into my whole spill of like every opener that I've done. Like, if you want that, like I've posted it before and I can share that video with you. It's more descriptive, and I want to get to other questions for the time we have here. But what I will say is, when you think of an opener, think of your framework and think of your style. So ultimately, if you have a really good framework and you understand what your style is, it works. Like, I'm going to give you one that I have used, but again, you're going to hear it and you may not want to use it, but it does work for me because of the way I deliver it. So I have an intro where literally I'll be like, they'll answer the phone. Let's say it's David. I'm like, hey, David, thanks for taking my call. Congrats. This is a cold call. Want to know what you won? That gets people laughing and it works for me. Now, for some of you, that might not work. I'm just, but you asked me what opener usually works for you. That's what works for me, because I can do the style. I have the framework. People laugh. It opens them up, and then we get into the conversation. So I'll just say that like that's what works for me. However, what works for me doesn't work for everyone. So, but you have to figure out how the framework is. How do I interrupt someone's pattern? And then the style is what can I say that is aligned with how I deliver things, so that people are open up and they actually listen to what I have to say. And as long as you focus on those, then you'll be successful.
Agree. Totally agree. When Morgan, did you ever do it when you were a kid and you were writing your signature for the first time? Did you just draw a bunch of options?
Yeah, I did.
Or did it come naturally?
No, we all were like, yeah, we're gonna be famous basketball players, and so we're like, yeah, let's just write our signature. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good analogy.
Yeah. I mean, signatures are kind of dead now, but yeah, like, you know, I remember as a kid, like, you know, there was that point where I needed a signature, because it was on the back of my debit card. I think it's the same in the US, where you need to be able to repeat your signature. And so I wrote down a load, like me and my friends all at school, we wrote down a load, we kept drawing them. And the ones that we liked, we kept doing until like it was like we could just keep doing it over and over again. And we knew it's successful.
I love that.
So I want to just, Victor, like, as Morgan said, there's no silver bullet here. So I would write down 5 that you think you like the look of. Maybe you've seen them on LinkedIn, or you've heard Morgan or myself mention them before. And then actually I'm going to nicely transition to Bruno's question here at the bottom, which is, should I stick to a script to begin with if I'm new to cold calling, or is it best to keep it natural and go with the flow? I think that when you're writing down these if we go back to the signature analogy, when you write down all your like openers, your 5 opening options, and then your like what happens is you become more and more natural. Like you pick the ones that you like and you become more and more natural on it. But the great thing is also it gives you that testing phase. Because maybe there's 2 openers that, maybe there's 2 signatures that you quite like, but maybe there's only one that you can repeat over and over again, right? Once you actually write them out 10, 20 times. So for yourself, Bruno, like I would say to start off with, stick with a script. One, because it's going to, it's going to stop you freaking out if you're brand new to cold calling, right? Maybe and maybe there's some context that I need around this, whether like you're new to cold calling but you're in a company that's been cold calling for a while, or whether you are or whether you've entered a company and you're doing cold calling for the first time and the company's doing cold calling for the first time. But if it's the former and they probably have a script that's working already, I'd stick with that script, keep trying it, and then make those iterations like you would with the signature, and to see what works. And then if you're brand new, again, I'd go back to it, write your 5 options down that you like, and then go through them one by one, keep testing which ones, and kind of actually track like which ones are working, which ones not. In the end, you should get to a point where you have a script that you like, but it completely naturally, and you can just go with the flow. And that's really an end state. It's very difficult to do that at the start, in my opinion.
I love that. I think that's really good. I mean, I actually don't have really too much to add. So I'm gonna let David like nail that answer and go to the next question, because that's pretty much what I was gonna say. I'm not gonna repeat anything here.
Morgan, I've never seen you lost for words.
No, I mean sometimes you hey, look, someone nails the answer, I'm not gonna add and say, hey, I got the same thing to say, and like, nah, that was good. Like I have nothing else to add.
I appreciate it.
Sometimes I have nothing to add. Okay, I have a habit of pushing the meeting. How do you ask good questions to hook the prospect? So asking good questions comes down to active listening. And when you're active listening, you want to identify words that you can extract to amplify. So when and we'll just I'll give an example. So someone might be like, say, hey, like we have a weak marketing strategy right now, or we have a average marketing strategy, or our marketing strategy is okay. Most people, when they hear that, they're like, okay, sounds great. And then they'll move on. And then they'll break down that their marketing strategy was okay. But the thing is like, and how you push this meeting is going to be different in each scenario. We know that, but like we're asking, how do you ask good questions? So you have to really listen to what people talk about, because if they say like, oh, it's okay, or like it's going all right now, you can unpack that and say like, it's going all right. Like, what does that mean? Or can you define to me like what all right means? Or can you elaborate more on like when you said this all right, like what does that mean to you? Right? I'm gonna start asking questions to figure out what exactly is this person talking about. So when you're looking to push the meeting, depending on how much dialogue you've had so far, I'm looking to unpack words that stand out to me so I can get more information. This doesn't happen all the time, but you're asking how you ask good questions with the prospect. That's one. Number two is going back to what we talked about. A lot of the answers here, let's come back to like understanding your buyer personas. The thing is, if you, I don't know where everyone's ended up this year. I don't know if you're 100%, 90%, 80%, you're struggling, you're not getting the results you want. I don't really care. Like if you want to get like 200, I've hit like 300%, even 400%. If you want to get to those levels, you have to study your buyer personas. Like you have to be obnoxious about it. Like if you understand what your buyer personas do, what they care about, and their obstacles, you're gonna ask better questions, right? When you know someone really well, you can ask better questions. The reason that most people don't know how to ask good questions is because one, they're not listening, and two, they don't understand their buyer persona. So they're just asking generic questions. So I would encourage one person here, two people here. I don't know who's gonna take this advice, but if you spit your time more studying the personas, you would ask better questions to hook people in, because you hook people in by showing that you know about them.
Yeah, for sure. I think so one thing I've been doing recently is I love my favorite podcasts in the world are usually just interviews with super successful people. And there's one particular podcast series that I love called The Diary of a CEO. Have you heard of this, Morgan? He's like a
No.
so he's a British guy.
No.
He's like in his late 20s, super successful, has already like exited like a massive marketing company for millions and millions. But he basically now does a series where he just interviews super successful people. And
Okay.
and the reason why, so I think it's the number one podcast in the UK at the moment, and I think the reason it's the number one podcast in the UK is not because of the great guests he gets, but it's because of how easy it is for him to just open these guests up. And you know, last week he had Tyson Fury. Do you know? I don't know whether you know your boxing at all, Morgan.
I know of Tyson
Okay,
Fury.
so he's
I
like,
watch UFC.
yeah,
So Tyson Fury. Yep.
cool. So he's like the number one heavyweight boxer of the world. He's this crazy guy. Yeah, he was on, and it's so interesting. Like a lot of what makes him able to open people up so much is going back to what you said at the start of this, Morgan. It's not taking the answers to questions at surface level, and he has this really simple way of taking it to the next level, and he just goes, "Tell me more." Tell me more. Tell me more. He does it so frequently, and it's now the number one podcast in the world. I think there's a Piers Morgan Life Stories is a UK thing again, but like I think that went to the US a bit as well. And like whatever you think of Piers Morgan,
Piers can be wild sometimes.
Yeah. But he's but you know he got all these people on. It's a great show. Like he opens people up, and I think again it's about he like really digs deep and he penetrates down. And I think there's a lot that we in sales can take from these kind of things. So that's something that I'm learning at the moment. But overall, like main thing going back to this question is just, you know, keep diving deeper, keep digging deeper. Don't be afraid to dig deeper. I always ask my questions. My rule is I always ask questions in 2s or 3s, never 1s, because there's always more more to learn.
I absolutely love that, and I think it comes down to always being and remaining curious. That's what it comes down really to everything, y'all, is like you just really have to remain curious. Like, and I know a lot of this stuff may be like not the silver bullets that some of you are looking for. Like, what's the question? What should I ask? And like sometimes it actually doesn't come down to that. It actually comes down to being more curious, actually caring. I know that sounds very fluffy and generic, but that actually is the answer. And to your point, David. Like there's a podcast I listen to. It's called The Pivot. It's a sports podcast, but they've had like Mayweather and Kevin Hart on there and stuff like that. And the reason that they're so good is like they like pause before they ask questions. They dive deeper. They're trying to always extract as much information as possible. That just doesn't happen as often in interviews anymore or even conversations. So the more you can do this, the better you will be in the long term. So I wanted to add that to this piece as well.
Love it. Absolutely love
it. All right,
it.
y'all, we got 9 minutes left. If you have any burning questions or rapid fire questions, feel free to add them in because we only got like 8 minutes left.
I'm just thinking there's one here. Trent asked a question. It's more, which we think is more marketing related, and I think the marketing team have posted your response from a marketing aspect. But can we just get that one up, Angelica? Ashley, sorry, Ashley. So this is learn names. Remember people's names at all times. That's another top sales.
Another tip.
I'm completely very sorry, Ashley. Cool. So Trent asked, when bringing a new product to market, what are some good ways to build brand awareness? The reason I kind of asked Ashley to bring this up is because Morgan, you're very incredibly entrepreneurial guy. You're not just an SDR for sure. So, like, do you have any advice, and maybe you can tie it into more of the sales side of things?
Yeah.
In response to Trent.
So here's something that I did this when I was an SDR and Trent. I there's a lot of ways you can go about it. I don't know what your budget is. I don't even know who you're marketing to. I don't need to know all that. You don't have to share that. But these are like 3 things that I think about. David, thanks for bringing this question to the table. So you can obviously look at from a marketing and a sales lens. Even as I've done a couple things before. I think number 1 is look at what your competitors have done. And there's a lot of conversations out there where it's like, I don't pay attention to the conversation, tunnel vision. And there's a degree to that. Like there's some lanes where I'm just like tunnel vision. I don't really care about the competitors. But if you're just starting out, you should probably check what your competition is doing and see how have they brought their products to market? How have they done it? And try to maybe figure out how you can zag off that. So one of the things you can do is, hey, like what campaigns did they run? How effective was the campaign? Is the campaign that they run, can we actually do that better, right, than them? So that's like a strategy. I like to see what other people have done and be like, can I bring this concept to life? Essentially, like that's how I do it. Hey, this works really well here. Can I do the same thing with my new products, right? So that's a way of going about it, and that in that sense. Number 2 is talk to your customers. This is something that I don't think people do that often. They're like, hey, we have a new product. We're going to tell all these new people about it. Why don't you tell your customers about it? Have them go into beta, having them feedback. And why don't you let your customers be the word of mouth and your marketing engines and your sales engines instead of your internal people? So you can have your internal people and your external people doing this. So when you bring a new product to market, go run a roundtable and get feedback from your top customers. That's the best way to build awareness because they're going to tell their peers who you're trying to sell to, right? I think that's a big piece as well. And another way to bring a product to market is the sales and marketing alignment is running some type of series around it. It could be a webinar series. It could be a blog series. I don't really care what you do. Depends on what resources you have. That's content led and it's value led as well. So you could run a whole content series around this and have people bought in, bring your customers in the content series, bring potential clients in the customer in the videos or whatever series you want to do. And now people are going to be more bought in. So those are 3 things that I would do if I was bringing a new product to market. I've done a variation of those 3 before, or have consulted people to do the same thing, and it's led into results for them to build brand awareness. So I would implore you to do the same.
Awesome. Just do it. Just get out there. The customer, just on what Morgan said about your prospects, just live where your prospects live. Super, super important. Sales and marketing both need to do that, right? Like, our Cognism's customers live a lot on LinkedIn because we're generally targeting sales and marketing, which is fantastic. So we can really use LinkedIn as such a massive tool for us. But if your prospects are, I've got 2 younger siblings and they both are loving BeReal right now. I don't know whether you're on Bareel, Morgan, or if you've heard of Bareel.
I've heard of this.
It's
it's
up and
I've
coming.
heard of it.
It's
I heard it's on fire.
It's up and coming. So if they live on there, then let's grab that one as well. Cool. I think that's it. Should we elaborate? Thanks, Libby. Big fan. You gotta get Bareel. It's the new thing.
Yeah, if anyone has it, like we have like 4 minutes left. We could do a quick rapid fire. If anyone has a quick question they want to throw our way, that's not like too long-winded, for the last question of the year. So if someone has something that's like a super quick question that we could answer really quickly, I want to give space to that real quick. But if there isn't any question that is like a super rapid fire one, David, is there anything that you want to wrap with? Your final piece of advice as we get out of here.
Well, we just got a question. Monica saved the bell.
She did. Earliest and latest hours to call. Look, I think it's going to depend on your region. I'm going to say that first and foremost before some of y'all shake your head and think my answer is going to be ridiculous. So, look, like I've made calls at 7:45 local time. I've gotten meetings as people are getting ready to work, all the way from 6 o'clock, 5:45. So, look, I think it depends on how bold you want to be and knowing your time zones. But look, I've done 7:45, 8 o'clock as earliest, and I've done 5:30, 6 o'clock as well. So that's me, but everyone's different.
Quick fire. It depends on your prospect, right? Like, is your prospect likely to want a call at that time? And I say that because, so for example, in France, correct me if I'm wrong. If anybody's French here, correct me if I'm wrong on this. I think it's illegal for your boss to text you after working hours. So like culturally, you would it'd be, I think it'd be very bad form to call someone after a certain time, because that's what they're used to. That's, business happens in business hours, which I think is great. But also if you're targeting recruitment, certainly here in the UK, I'm assuming it's definitely the same in the US. Those guys, they're in their prime hours after work and before work, because that's when they're speaking to candidates. So they often start incredibly early and finish incredibly late. So that would be think about your prospects and where they want to be at any given time.
Cool. D Smith, I mean, real quick, they're important. That's all I gotta say there. Again, it was a rapid fire, so I say they are important. It leaves an additional touch. It doesn't hurt to leave them. They don't hurt you, essentially. They only help you. So that's how I think about it. So I don't know if David has anything to add to that.
No, I find them less important for the UK than the US, for example. But there are tools that are able to, if you're using the right kind of dialer, you might be able to leave them automatically. So yeah, definitely not the most important. But if you can do it, all touch points are good.
Awesome. Well, y'all, we're right at time. For everyone that showed up here, we appreciate you. For those of you who've been to multiple sessions with us this year, and you've been here before, let us know in the chat. Obviously, we love the support that you show in this series that we do around just answering questions and doing cold calling and things of that nature. So in the new year, we're going to be doing more exciting things. We're going to continuously be here. So excited to see y'all in 2023, and have a great, happy holidays, new year, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much, guys. Really appreciate it.